Yeah, tell me when we're live. Okay, good evening, everyone. Here we are again, and we've reached the point in the Tibetan tradition of mental development of the three lower realms of existence, chapter 5. So this is, this book is a Gelugpa text in the Kagyu and the Nyingma, the four thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma. This is often translated as the suffering, the suffering nature of samsara, going through the different um, parts, you might say, of samsara. The Gelugpa part is a little bit different, a little bit shortened, but we'll go through that. But I wanted to point out something today that hit me this week. Um, this passage that was read Tuesday night. So I'm many of you know of Pata Rinpoche, one of the great modern lamas. Modern, I mean, lived in the 1800s. And he was just this truly remarkable figure. It said that he taught the complete Bodhicharya Avatara, Shantideva's great work, Entering the Bodhisattva Path, that he taught it completely 108 times. And this means that doesn't mean that he was teaching it for a week. It's like 3 months, Um, and he was just this remarkable example, kind of wandering around and never really plugged into the hierarchies. And he had several great students, including Lama Mipam, who was probably fully enlightened. Um, and also these two, Kenshin Kunzang Pelden and Minyak Kunzang Sonam. So the first one is considered like one of the great Kagyu Kempos, and the other one is a Gelugpa Geshe. They were both students of Pata Rinpoche, and each of them wrote a commentary on Shantideva's great work. So Padmakara publishers put it together as this text, Wisdom, Two Buddhist Commentaries. Wonderful, wonderful book. I mean, I read Kunzang Pelden's commentary, I think twice, and some of the chapters more than that. But for the first time the other night, I looked by mistake. I grabbed the wrong book where I was going somewhere and ended up looking at Minyak Kunzang Sonam's for the first time. And he starts, see if I can find it. Yeah, his introduction, before he even gets into it, it's called A Brief Teaching on Why It Is Necessary to Develop the Wisdom, which is the realization of emptiness. And he gets into a teaching about the six perfections, right? So we're talking about conventional Mahayana, the first five of the paramitas, and then the sixth one being wisdom. And he has this wonderful discussion of, how you can come to a realization of emptiness, like a partial realization, but realization of emptiness without practicing those first five paramitas. The practice of generosity, the practice of ethics, the practice of patience, the practice of like joyful kind of perseverance, the practice of meditation, and then of course the practice which starts out as the study of, but the experience, the practice of wisdom. So those first five perfections, in its sense, are not necessary. Now, someone has to have a certain amount of merit, surely, to have an insight into emptiness. But the point is that you can have tremendous deep understanding and not be a Mahayana practitioner. We often have this attitude that here's, wisdom, the realization of emptiness. That's what we're all going for. And all these five perfections are helping us get there, but they're somehow lower. But that's a mistake. Um, it's like I realized my own kind of wrong attitude when I stumbled onto these teachings. That all about wisdom, that's good. The Buddhism is great because it points out the necessity for realization and wisdom. But somehow all of the stuff, the tankas, the offerings, the rituals, all that's like not necessary, you know. It's really just about the wisdom. So Kunzang Sonam makes the point that what is different about the Mahayana? Well, first of all, just simply the valid insights into emptiness. You can all the way up to an arhat, a conqueror. I mean, it's a tremendously high state. It's said that you have such knowledge of how things actually are that you can walk through a wall. So first, there's the realization of the emptiness of self, but then further, there's the partial realization of the emptiness of outer phenomenon. And these are, you know, again, tremendously profound states, humbling even to read about them. But for the Mahayana, the motivation is the liberation of all. You know, it's so mind boggling because we go around during the day and we're not thinking like that at all. Everything is filtered through, you know, this sense of self. What's in it for me? I mean, not so coarse, you know, we're doing things for others. I mean, I'm not being completely cynical or anything, but it just shows the greatness of the vow. So he makes the point that the two are equivalent. In other words, you can practice the six perfections, and in that, you're practicing wisdom. And he also makes the point that the Mahayana is practicing this great wisdom on those five perfections. They're not two different things, so to speak, which is how we kind of look at it in a dualistic way. So it's the greatness of this mind that's realized emptiness practicing generosity, practicing ethics, practicing patience, practicing virya, you know, the joyful perseverance, practicing meditation. And I just felt so fortunate, you know, because it's like, you know, we've, speaking for myself, stumbled into this without any kind of plan, and you end up with you know, thoroughly qualified teachers like Kempo, but then these great teachers like Tetsang Rinpoche, Garchen Rinpoche, and they're teaching that way. They're teaching the right way, and so the Mahayana is really great, and it's easy to not understand that because we don't have the cultural setting for it and we don't have the natural kind of confidence in it. I mean, that's supported by our society and our families and everything. So you're kind of alone in a way. But yet to practice in that way is the greatest motivation and results in the greatest realization, which is Buddhahood itself. And so this is just the most positive attitude towards human beings, the most positive attitude towards this world. And the skillfulness of these teachers, I mean, how it's presented, not in some sort of didactic way. I mean, how many times have I read something like this and yet, you know, it hits you? Why? Just because of the perseverance, sincerity, and the perseverance. And even doing things in such a coarse way, such a way with so little understanding. And yet the genius of the Dharma is that it is our true nature as we experience it in a dualistic way. So it's working on us all the time. And this is the accumulation of merit and wisdom. To be completely a Buddha, you have to have this complete accumulation of merit and wisdom, those two things together. And in a way, it's almost like a different kind of animal from the normal way that people think about enlightenment or even Buddhism itself, this kind of profound insight into it. And it made me think of an experience I had with Gar Rinpoche as far as teaching the importance, because, you know, I have no idea how a mind like that works. But I do believe it's just kind of like a spontaneous, compassionate, skillful response to the ignorance and the conditioning of the student. So this took place at a Yamataka Drupta in Arizona, and it it just so happened because they had me doing a little minor bit of chanting at certain points, and I mean nothing very skillful, but a very simple chant at one point in each one of the sessions. And so because of that, I was sitting up with the chant masters, and was just sitting up there, which meant that I was kind of just a stone's throw. I mean, very close to Rinpoche because I was sitting up in the front in his line of sight, basically, right up by his throne. And they give you a handout of all the different hand gestures, all the different mudras that are done throughout the week, and they're really extensive. And there's a real kind of limitation to myself that I just, I have trouble with mudras. And when you ask someone to teach you, I mean, it's amazing. You see, 'cause some people don't have this kind of limitation. I think I'm a little dyslexic, so I'm getting everything backwards. But someone sits in front of you and shows you the various mudras. I cannot get it doing it in reverse. Some people can do the actual reverse while someone's facing them and demonstrating, but just me not. And so then they're kind of hard, and there's so many of them in different places and that. But they give you this chart. But having a little difficulty, what's your defense? Your defense is, well, I don't need to be doing those. So we were starting like this, and they were, uh, practice was going along, and I had made a decision to myself, well, I'm just going to focus on, the visualization and that. I'm not going to bother with these mudra things. It's just too much to learn right now. And it's kind of dark in here and reading this paper. I mean, I had all sorts of good reasons that shouldn't be doing it, couldn't be doing it. And so we're just going along. And this is just shortly after I had made this big monumental decision because I sort of left myself off from 9 days of having to do mudras. This is great. It's like a little holiday in the midst of the discipline of the Drupta. But all of a sudden, Gaur Rinpoche stops and gives a little teaching. And his teaching was how some people are very lazy about mudras. Oh, this is not good. He didn't say this is not good. It was so completely skillful, when you find yourself completely deflated, but not shamed, not demeaned, not put down. It's like having a wonderful, your mother who's always wanting to help you with the instruction. She's not doing it to build herself up or to put you down. That whole dualistic thing is not there. It's just pure. So at any rate, I just wanted to share that because I was very struck by, I'm going to have to read his whole commentary now, the profundity of what we're doing, deeper than we know. So it made me want to share something else. We are, again, fortunate because we've had this method. There's so much method in Tibetan Buddhism. It's not just Tibetan Buddhism, of course, but the Tibetans have done a very good job of preserving it. And my daughters are like studying Indian Buddhism and that, it was all there. It was all there. And when they study Chinese Buddhism, traditionally Chinese Buddhism, it was all there. It was remarkable what was going on, the little bits that we know, basically. But there is this, it's not a danger, but, it's very easy to read very high texts and not understand this method and wisdom together. You can sort of crystallize it conceptually. You can be very smart, have kind of conceptual understanding of all these high states, but we haven't had the experience of how those states are realized, which is the practice. Why did all these great lamas do all these things? And why are they doing soak offerings? Why are they doing animal releasing ceremonies? The traditional great ones that we read about, the kind of practices that you would think, well, why are they doing that? So I came across a famous teaching by the third patriarch of Zen in China. and realized it's like a Dzogchen teaching, and yet it's deceptively simple. And again, we're not seeing, he was head of a great monastery and all sorts of people, monks doing all sorts of, well, I mean, why be a monk? Why anything? Why any of the method? But still, I wanted to read just a little bit of it because it shows you the great freedom. And again, not apart from all the offerings. Anyway, the great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. Make the smallest distinction, however, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart. If you wish to see the truth, then hold no opinions for or against anything. To set up what you like against what you dislike is the disease of the mind. When the deep meaning of things is not understood, the mind's essential peace is disturbed to no avail. That statement, when love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. It reminds me of, you can look it up, verse 34 in the wisdom chapter 9 in Shantideva, or I think it's in our 37 Bodhisattva practices, I think it's verse 22. That kind of great freedom, it's the same teaching. The way is perfect, like vast space where nothing is lacking and nothing is in excess. Indeed, it is due to our choosing to accept or reject that we do not see the true nature of things. Live neither in the entanglements of outer things, nor in the inner feelings of emptiness. Be serene in the oneness of things, and such erroneous views will disappear by themselves. When you try to stop activity to achieve passivity, your very effort fills you with activity. As long as you remain in one extreme or the other, you will never know oneness. So this great teaching that we've inherited, this middle way, that term, the middle way, is so wonderful because it's not only like in the Buddha's life story, the middle way between his, self-indulgence and self-abnegation, but also between this inner way, in an inner way, between accepting and rejecting. Those who do not live in the single way fail in both activity and passivity, fail in assertion and denial. To deny the reality of things is to miss their reality. To assert the emptiness of things is to miss their reality. The more you talk and think about it, the further astray you wander from the truth. Stop talking and thinking, and there's nothing you will not be able to know. To return to the root is to find the meaning, but to pursue appearances is to miss the source. At the moment of inner enlightenment, there is going beyond appearance and emptiness. The changes that appear to occur in the empty world we call real only because of our ignorance. Do not search for the truth, only cease to cherish opinions. Do not remain in the dualistic state. Avoid such pursuits carefully. If there is even a trace of this and that, of right and wrong, the mind essence will be lost in confusion. Although all dualities come from the one, do not be attached even to this one. When the mind exists undisturbed in the way, nothing in the world can offend. And when a thing can no longer offend, it ceases to exist in the old way. When no discriminating thoughts arise, the old mind ceases to exist. When thought objects vanish, the thinking subject vanishes. As when the mind vanishes, objects vanish. Things are objects because of the subject mind. The mind subject is such because of things, objects. Understand the relativity of these two and the basic reality, the unity of emptiness. In this emptiness, the two are indistinguishable and each contains in itself the entire world. If you do not discriminate between coarse and fine, you will not be tempted to prejudice and opinion. To live in the great way is neither easy nor difficult, but those with limited views are fearful and irresolute. The faster they hurry, the slower they go. And clinging cannot be limited. Even to be attached to the idea of enlightenment is to go astray. Just let things be in their own way, and there will be neither coming nor going. Obey the nature of things, your own nature, and you will walk freely and undisturbed. When thought is in bondage, the truth is hidden, for everything is murky and unclear, and the burdensome practice of judging brings annoyance and weariness. What benefit can be derived from distinctions and separation? It goes on. This is about half of it. But what strikes me here is both the simplicity but the profundity of it. And I think what's so remarkable is the skillfulness of Dharma practices. I mean, Tibet had a great debate way back when at the beginning, as whether the sort of the gradual path of Kamalashila and the Indian monks, or the sudden illumination practice of, I can't remember the name of the Chinese monk. And the result of the debate is that Tibet went with the gradual path. So that's what we have here. Now, as always, as human beings do, they tend to cling to their own without even understanding of what their own is. And so it became a little bit in those ancient histories, the Chinese master is a little bit denigrated. And our own Chögyam Rinpoche has been involved in all sorts of investigations and study about these texts that Megan has been working on, the Dunhuang texts, about that Chinese master, and seeing how it was kind of like politicized by the Tibetans in a way. In other words, it's holding up both. But I think it's so wonderful, especially for us, folks like us, without this kind of being born into a Buddhist culture where there's certain kind of doubts that you don't have to get over. And there isn't, there's kind of a more supportive environment. So the other day, Gretchen and I went out. I took her out to a bagel shop, Brugger's bagel shop, for lunch. And, it was snowy in that. And we parked in a parking lot, and there was this little dry, like a little barrier, you might say, but they were trying to make it. It had gravel in it, and a couple of juniper bushes, and maybe one little tree and a boulder. It was nothing much, but it was kind of like the little dry garden that you might see in Arizona, for instance. But Gretchen stepped out of the car, and there was one bigger. It was more than gravel. It was like a hand-sized rock that had somehow split in half, and of a lighter color. It was like a sandy yellow, and just this flat face facing up. And her first thought was, it was like a sasa, one of these representations, two-dimensional representations of Buddha or whatever. And I realized, I thought about when we were in Tibet, and this is in Tibet, the trash, not the trash, but the litter on the side of the road, not on the highways. Thank you, the modern Chinese highways, but it's Dharma. There was Dharma everywhere. And I just thought, for children growing up, how wonderful that is. Not everyone's going to be seriously, deeply into, but it just seemed to be so compassionate and so supportive in the midst of all the stupid things that human beings do, and all the ignorance and all the selfishness and all the grasping and everything. Still this kind of Dharma environment, and what it must have been like to be raised in that. And that had been going on for 1,000 years. And so your greatest figures were Buddhist monks. And you're living in a society where, there were no cell phones, there was no telegraph, there were no airplanes, there was no nothing. That was your world. it gives you a certain kind of appreciation of some of the heights that the Tibetans attained. So we've come across like this text from the third patriarch of Zen in China, and they're tremendously profound, but they're also often, they're read in kind of a surface way. Um, it's what I think is so helpful is like on the first noble truth, when you realize the suffering of the world and these four thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma. It's so important because it's the juice of it. It's not just an idea, and you start to see your own truth, so to speak, of your own suffering and your own delusion and all the habits and graspings. Let me continue just a little bit. If you wish to move in the one way, do not dislike even the world of senses and ideas. Indeed, to accept them fully is identical with true enlightenment. The wise man strives to know goals, but the foolish man fetters himself. There is one Dharma, not many. The distinctions arise from the clinging needs of the ignorant. To seek mind with the discriminating mind is the greatest of all mistakes. Rest and unrest derive from illusion. With enlightenment, there is no liking and disliking. All dualities come from ignorant inference. They are like dreams or flowers in air, foolish to try to grasp them. Gain and loss, right and wrong, such thoughts must finally be abolished at once. The eye never sleeps, all dreams will naturally cease. If the mind makes no discriminations, the 10,000 things are as they are, of a single essence. To understand the mystery of this one essence is to be released from all entanglement. When all things are seen equally, the timeless self-essence is reached. No comparisons or analogies are possible in this causeless, relationless state. Consider movement stationary and stationary in motion. Both movement and rest disappear. When such dualities cease to exist, oneness itself cannot exist. To this ultimate finality, no law or description applies. For the unified mind is in accord with the way. All self-centered striving ceases. Doubts and irresolutions vanish, and life in true faith is possible. With a single stroke, we are freed from bondage. Nothing clings to us, and we hold to nothing. All is empty, clear, self-illuminating, with no exertion of the mind's power. Here, thought, feeling, knowledge, and imagination are of no value. In this world of suchness, there is neither self nor other than self. To come directly into harmony with this reality, just simply say when doubts arise, not two. In this not two, nothing is separate, nothing is excluded. No matter when or where, enlightenment means entering this truth. And this truth is beyond extension or diminution in time or space. In it, a single thought is 10,000 years. Emptiness here, emptiness there, but the infinite universe stands always before your eyes. Infinitely large and infinitely small, no difference, for definitions have vanished and no boundaries are seen. So too with being and non-being. Don't waste time in doubts and arguments that have nothing to do with this. One thing, all things, move among and intermingle without distinction. To live in this realization is to be without anxiety about non-perfection. To live in this faith is the road to non-duality, because the non-dual is one with the trusting mind. Words, the way is beyond language, for in it there is no yesterday, no tomorrow, no today. So extremely profound text. When you read the Ganges Mahamudra, Tilopa's teachings to Naropa on the banks of the Ganges, this great Mahamudra text, If you read The Flight of the Garuda, the great Dzogchen text, this, this is I don't want to say the same, that makes it sound so simple, but Lopa said a long time ago, it's not the appearances that are the problem, but the attachment to the appearances. It's such a subtle thing. Again, for us, the great benefit that we have, the skillfulness, is all these methods, because in a way you don't need any methods, but of course you do to burn through the things that you don't need. And when he was talking here, for instance, about let me find it, all is empty, clear, self-illuminating. This is, the Tantra. This is the practice of visualization. When you visualize yourself in this way, the clarity of it, the vividness of it, we train ourselves to know the meaning, but we also get the meaning just through the visualization of these sacred forms. And the Vajra pride, most important, this understanding, this confidence that this is not wrong. So we're using form, subtle form, to see the emptiness of form and no form. At any rate, I just think we're so lucky because of having method. It makes sense to me that at his great enlightenment, the Buddha hesitated to teach. How can you teach something that's, like it said, what is it here? In a single thought is 10,000 years. Of course, this is like our Samanta Bahadra prayer. In one dust mote, an infinite number of Buddhas. How do you understand these things? It's getting you beyond, using concepts to get beyond your concepts. So, at any rate, forgive my kind of going off on this, but the two things sort of came together for me in this way this week, and I thought it was just such a reminder of, how wonderful it is, everything that we're doing. And then, when I looked at this week's chapter on the three lower realms of existence, that's the Gelugpas are doing. The Kagyu includes the teaching on the four thoughts that turn the mind, the suffering nature of samsara, includes the lower realms and the higher realms of the desire realm. But in this Gelugpa text, they're just doing the three lower realms of existence: animals, hungry ghosts, and the hellish beings. And it reminded me of Lama Tarchan. He was telling me he was giving teachings on this, on the suffering nature of samsara in Los Angeles once. And one of his students came up to him afterwards and he said, I don't want to hear all this stuff about hells. I don't want to hear this stuff about hangry ghosts and all the torturing. This is way too painful. Because he had read like some of the things I was just reading from the third patriarch. We hear these wonderful, soaring, kind of inspiring, kind of, people like touching Buddhahood with their mind and attempting with the words. But this is the great skillfulness. When we read about the lower realms, we have natural kind of feeling of not wanting to go there. And also we start to see the hellish aspects in our own existence, the things that are the cause of this kind of suffering. So you can take it in a literal way for sure, but you can also take it in an inner psychological way. So let's see. We've got just a few minutes, but this is a short chapter. So let's start with the animal realm. The main suffering of animals is fear of being devoured by other animals. They also suffer from stupidity, heat, cold, hunger, being put to hard work by humans, and being fed upon by insects and worms. Scorning the Dharma and calling others by animal names like pig are causes for rebirth as an animal. We cannot directly perceive the suffering of the hells or the Preta world, but our human karma is sufficiently related to that of animals for us to be able to see their suffering. Contemplating this suffering will lead to a great sense of renunciation and a feeling of remorse. By means of contemplating suffering, we may develop mercy or empathy with the suffering of others. Seeing that we can bring an end to our own suffering and help alleviate the suffering of others, we are motivated to develop renunciation. Tear it down. Gurus could not use such methods in guiding disciples in this present age of degeneration. On another occasion, one of Marpa's disciples came to him seeking an initiation, and oh, look at this. There's a printing mistake. Text ends there. Anyway, this idea I think is really wonderful. Tear it down. Gurus could not use such methods in guiding disciples in this present age of degeneration. This is referring to Marpa giving for Milarepa's purification, having him build like these stone towers. And he would do all this work, again, no, no heavy machinery. And then Marpa would come and say, tear it down. And this, of course, was just like devastating to Milarepa because he had to do it again and again and again. And you can imagine the doubts. All he wanted was the empowerment, and the Lama wouldn't give it to him, making him go through all these things. And yet he had confidence in Marpa, so he was doing this. But it was not pleasant relationship. How many people could handle that kind of interaction with the Lama these days? It shows the great faith that Milarepa had. Of course, this comes out of the culture too. But for us, I think how gentle all of our teachers are, because, our egos are very fragile, and you don't want to destroy the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. But at any rate, the animal realm, that's the essence of it. Now, going lower, the Preta realm, hungry ghosts, the general suffering of the Pretas includes feeling hot, cold, tired, hungry, and thirsty, as well as the fear of being destroyed. Pretas exist both in the human realm and in a Preta world, in which nothing grows. All is hot and dry. If at the moment of death there is attachment to food and drink, one is reborn as a Preta. Hungry ghosts. Pretas have a tall body, a large head and stomach, but a skinny neck and limbs. They become like a dry skeleton due to lack of water and continually search for nourishment, but without success. They have no chance to practice Dharma. Long ago, a pundit, while on his way to Bodh Gaya, met a female Preta with her 500 children. She asked the pundit to search in Bodh Gaya for her husband, a man with no right eye, arm, or leg, who had gone there 12 years before in search of food for his starving family. The pundit found the Preta husband and delivered a message that he was to return home with the food. The Preta then told him that in 12 years, all he had found was a wad of spit, which by the force of a man's prayer could be taken as nourishment by a Preta. Pretas also experience the following three kinds of individual suffering. One, seeing food at a distance, which disappears upon drawing near, whereas they cannot even see a drop of water in the Ganges. Finding food, which as soon as it touches the mouth, turns into acid or something else disagreeable. And third, upon finding food, not being able to swallow it because of a Preta's thin neck. Avarice, discouraging others from being generous. Stealing and envy are all causes for birth in the Preta realm. And then to finish tonight, the three lower realms of existence, the hells. The following description of the 18 states of hell is based on a work by Nagarjuna, in which he condensed teachings on this subject from the sutras. The hells described are three types: hot hells, cold hells, the occasional hells. One may have one's own opinion about the existence of hells, but without any realization of this suffering, there would be little growth of renunciation, and one's practice would not be intensive. So first is the hot hells. They are located countless miles beneath the stupa in Bodh Gaya and are the lowest state of existence in samsara. They include the following regions. One, the first hot hell, called Revive, is the one closest closest to Bodh Gaya. Here, beings have the clairvoyant ability to remember the non-virtuous deeds of previous lives. As soon as such an act is remembered, weapons appear, and they fight with and kill one another. In one day, these beings die 300 times. Each time they were reborn again in the same hell. There is no limit to the great suffering that they endure. Humans who spend much of their lives killing, soldiers and butchers, can be reborn in this realm. Beings in the second hot hell, called Black Line, have large bodies and delicate skins. By means of the projection of their karma, lines are drawn on their skin with hot pokers. Then their flesh is cut along these lines. Harming other living beings is the cause of rebirth here. The third hot hell is called mass destruction. All the guards of hell gather all the inhabitants and destroy them all at once. The sufferings that must be experienced here are beyond imagination. People that kill en masse take rebirth here. The fourth hell, hot hell, is called crying out for help. Beings enter a large metal house seeking refuge. The doors are then locked and the house turns red hot. Monks who break their vows of abstaining from drinking alcohol are reborn here. The suffering in the fifth hot hell is similar to the fourth, but here the intensity is doubled. Sixth, in the depiction of the wheel of existence, a large iron pot is shown in which beings are boiled over a hot flame. This illustration refers to the sixth hell, in which one experiences all kinds of suffering due to heat. Thus, the name of the hell, hot. Causing dissension, among others, leads to rebirth here. The seventh hot hell has the same type of suffering as the previous one, but with greater intensity. Eighth, there is no greater suffering than in the eighth hot hell, called ceaseless, in which the inhabitants become indistinguishable from a raging fire. Committing one of the 5 heinous crimes is the cause for birth here. Let's see if we can remember the 5 heinous crimes. Killing one's father, killing one's mother, shedding the blood of a Buddha, killing a bodhisattva. Anyone remember the 5th one? Sure. Let's see. See if I can find it. Yes, thank you, Dave. Yeah, sowing discord in the Sangha, referring to Devadatta's history, those 5 things. All right, surrounding each of these 8 regions of hell are 4 circles of auxiliary hells. As a being's karma, which caused his rebirth in hell, is used up, one moves progressively outward through these 4 circular regions, dying and taking rebirth each time one moves from one to the next. The innermost circles resembles hot ash. The second circle is like quicksand, in which one is bitten by insects. The third appears beautiful at a distance, but as one moves closer, all things turn to weapons. And the fourth is an ocean of burning liquid like acid. One must remain in each of these circles for a long time before moving on to the next. So those are the hot hells. Now the cold hells. To the north of Bodh Gaya are the hot hells, cold hells, sorry, the same distance as the hot hells below Bodh Gaya, same distance away as the hot hells below Bodh Gaya. In these regions, in Sanskrit called pleasureless, there is no source of light, and all is covered with ice. The freezing wind blows constantly, and the denizens of these hells, whose bodies are huge, have no protection from the cold and suffer great torment. The 8 regions of the cold hells are, first, in the first cold hell, all beings have huge goose pimples. In the second cold hell, the goose pimples break out into sores. In the third cold hell, is so cold that bodily movement is not possible, and the beings can only shiver and sneeze, and since its name is Achu. In the fourth cold hell, even speech is not possible. One can only groan. In the fifth cold hell, one's jaws are frozen shut. Due to the intense cold in the sixth cold hell, one's body cracks like the petals of a blue lotus. In the seventh cold hell, cracks form in one's body like the lines of a lotus. In the eighth cold hell, the most severe, the cracks grow larger and one's body falls apart. blood and internal organs flow out and are eaten by insects. And even though this matter has left the body, one still experiences suffering from it. Holding wrong views, such as disbelief in the law of cause and effect, is cause for rebirth here. Another cause is inflicting the pain of coldness on others. Then finally, the occasional hells. The location of the third type of hell region varies according to one's karma. The inhabitants may live in harmony during the day, but suffer through fighting with one another at night. Or a married couple might live happily during the day, but at night the wife turns into a serpent and bites her husband. The cause of taking birth here is observing morality during the day, but not at night. There is a twofold purpose for contemplating the hell regions. First, to develop renunciation, and then to cause one to search within for the reason for taking birth there. This will lead to a desire to apply the four opponent powers. So you see this, the sense of this here. If you really have a vivid kind of investigation, visualization of these very vivid pains, and then to look for the cause of those in your mind right now, this, makes it real. I think sometimes, I think Professor Kanzi said how, with the rise of the scientific method and modern psychology, everything sort of became abstract. Whereas in the old days, like the Greek gods and that, they were like alive, and the people experienced very vividly their qualities. But rather than just being some abstract thing, the teachings of the Dharma are, again, have juice, have alive. I think to myself sometimes it's like, when you talk about, let's say, or an appearance of, some demon or something in your mind, to the modern way, well, that's just an abstract thought you're having. But in the traditional way, that demon can grab you by the feet and be banging you. You have effects from it. So again, not abstract and not just merely conceptual, but something that's, vivid. So the twofold purpose for contemplating the hell regions: develop renunciation, and to cause one to search within for the reason for taking birth there. And this will lead to a desire to apply the four opponent powers. And if you remember that from the previous chapter, this is in the Tantra, Vajrasattva. Of course, they use the four opponent powers too, to vividly remember your shortcomings, to feel regret, to practice bodhicitta and the strong determination to not fall into the power of those wrong karmas, wrong actions, and then practice bodhicitta to reverse them. But at any rate, this will lead to a desire to apply the four opponent powers. All that separates one from these hells is one's breath and one's accumulation of merit. To realize the great fragility that we live in, really we're like one breath away from death. Whether or not one believes that hells exist as such, it is essential to refrain from non-virtue. The Buddha did not teach in order to convert people to his views. He simply made known that which already exists and showed the path away from suffering. Okay, so that'll do for tonight. Next time we might fill this a little bit out with the other discussion of the other three realms in the third of the four thoughts that turns the mind to Dharma, the suffering nature of samsara. But other than that, we'll go forward. So the next chapter in Tibetan tradition of mental development is, I believe, renunciation. Yeah, renunciation. So a little bit different from the four thoughts, but the Lukupas have their own kind of structure. Okay, any questions? Or we'll do a dedication. dedicate the merit from this evening towards all motherly sentient beings. May each and every one of us never forget the gratitude that we have from all our infinite mothers. May we never forget the suffering that they are involved in. And may we never give up our motivation to liberate them and all beings altogether. Svaha. Okay.